and they speak with Prithu Maharaj. So the instructions of the Kumaras is almost identical to what Prahlad Maharaj is speaking about here, in terms of how we can understand the nature of the soul, how we can understand using our intelligence that we are not the body with the soul, and then understanding that we wholeheartedly, with our mind, body, and intelligence, uh, engage in complete Krishna consciousness, Ananya Bhakti, and that is the only business of the living entity. So this whole idea of how we can engage in Krishna consciousness is repeated in almost identical fashion in many parts of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And the reason it's done that way so that no matter which section of the Bhagavatam we read, we get the consistent message that the purpose of human life is to practice bhakti. And in this particular verse, uh, Prahlad Maharaj is speaking about how the Lord is situated in everyone's heart, and one should therefore offer respect to every living entity according to that living entity's position or manifestation. And that's the portion I wanted to focus on. Srila Prabhupada in his purport focuses on the confusion that sometimes Mayavadis bring about, that since the Lord is in everyone's heart, everyone is the Lord. And of course, when speaking uh, with a practicing devotee audience, right, all of you are practicing devotees for a long time, that is not a confusion you have that somehow we are the Lord. So because of reading Srila Prabhupada's purports and hearing from acharyas, we're very fortunate that we don't have this confusion, that we don't think we are going to become the Lord. So I'll focus more on the part of the purport and the part of the translation that that really talks about that the Lord is sitting in everyone's heart, and thus one should offer respect to every living entity according to that living entity's position or manifestation. And that's the part I'd like to, with your permission, focus on a little bit to understand how that works and how we understand that. So this is not a new concept, right? That if you look at in the Srimad Bhagavad Gita, in the fifth chapter, also Krishna says, uh, he speaks that verse. He says, "Vidya Vinaya Sampanne Brahmane Gavihastini Shuni Chaiva Shvapakecha Pandita Samadarshina." He speaks that he says that a humble sage, a humble sage with knowledge, Vidya Vinaya Sampanne, with knowledge and humility, gentle sage. He can see Brahmana, a very highly learned Brahmana, Gavi, a cow, Hastini, an elephant, Shuni, a dog, Shwapaka. Shwapaka is a low-born Chandala, or a person who regularly cooks and eats dogs. Shwapaka literally means one who cooks dogs, not that one somebody who incidentally ate a dog by mistake, but one who has a regular practice of cooking and eating dogs. So not a very elevated person in that sense, right? So the verse says that Vidya Vinaya Sampanne Brahmane Gavi Hastini Shuni Shaivasha Pakesha. So all these different categories of living entities. Clearly, a highly learned Brahmana who's very highly elevated is in a certain category. Uh, Gavi, cow, a gentle animal, is in a certain category. Hastini, elephant, huge body, a certain category. Shuni, a dog. Shwapaka, a person who's eating a dog. So all these living entities are in different categories. So Pandita, a person who's learned, Samadarshina, looks at them with equal vision. So that's the verse that we read in the fifth chapter. Similarly, in the 18th chapter, there's a verse that Krishna says, he says, Ishvara Sarvabhutanam Hriddeshe Arjuna Tishtati Brahmayan Sarvabhutani Yantra Rudhani Mayaya. So he says, Ishvara Sarvabhutanam, the Ishvara, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in his Paramatma form, Sarvabhutanam, in all living entities. Sarva means everyone. Bhutana means living entities, not just humans, but all living entities. Hriddeshe, in the region of the heart. Arjuna, oh Arjuna, Tishtati. Tishtati literally means stands. But in this context, it means situated. So Tishtade literally means standing in Sanskrit, but in the context of this verse, it means situated. So the Supreme Personality of Godhead is situated in the region of the heart of every living entity, including devotees, including non-devotees, including people we don't like. It doesn't matter. The Lord is sitting in everyone's heart. There might be people we consider are not so advanced and acting in a abominable manner. Well, the Lord is sitting in their heart as well. And the Lord is sitting in the heart of animals and all sorts of creatures. And Brahmayan Sarva Bhutani. So Yantra Rudhani Maya. So this body is like a yantra. Yantra means a machine. And it's got the ability to do things and so on. Just like a car can move and so on. And so we're and this the soul is directing the wanderings of all living entities as if you're seated on a machine made of material energy. Similar comparison is made in the 13th chapter as well of the Gita, where Krishna speaks about uh, this whole concept of Kshetra and Kshetragya, the field and the knower of the field. And he says there are two knowers of the field. One is the individual knower who knows his field or your body, and the supreme Kshetragya or the super soul who knows all bodies. So this concept is mentioned in multiple sections of both the Gita and the Bhagavatam. So we understand that the living entity is actually the Atma, and the Paramatma or the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his Paramatma feature is present in everyone's heart. So with that understanding, we offer respect to every living entity according to that living entity's position or manifestation. And that's a very important point. So one should offer respect to every living entity. That is not debatable. That is an absolute statement that we should offer respects to all living entities. But how is mentioned in the last part of the sentence, according to that living entity's position or manifestation. And if you read the third canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, the teachings of Kapila Dev actually goes into a detailed description of the categories of living entities. He speaks about all categories of living entities, right from living entities that have horizontal nourishment, like most animals and worms and so on, and then vertical nourishment, which includes humans. Like we stand upright and we intake food with our mouths, and then the nourishment actually goes downward as opposed to horizontally. Uh, so he divides living entities in those categories, moving, non-moving, and so on. And then he talks about how each living entity is offered respect. And he concludes that the spiritual master, who is the Parama Vaishnava and gives us Krishna consciousness, is worthy of the highest respect. So, from a categorization standpoint, not every living entity gets the same treatment. Just like if you go to a hospital, there are people who are all sick. The treatment given to different patients varies based on their illness. It's not like every single patient is given the same medicine. It doesn't work like that. So, although everyone is sick and everyone is given medicine, but the nature of the medicine varies based on the illness. So, similarly, living entities based on their position are offered respect in the way that's appropriate for them. Right. So, uh, for instance, if a small child were to come into the room, you offer respect to that small child by offering them affection. Right? You wouldn't offer dandavat pranam to a small child. If a 3-year-old child walks into the room, and if you stand up and offer full of prostrated obeisances to that child, that'll be considered a little strange. Right? Although you respect the living entity, the Paramatma in the heart of the child, but you offer your respect to that small child by offering your affection. And that is the way you interact. If you were to see a venomous serpent, right, you offer respects to that venomous serpent not by offering prostrated obeisances or picking up the serpent, but by staying away. You respect the space that the serpent needs, and you stay away. And in that way, you offer respect. If you see a ferocious animal like a lion or a tiger, you stay away. You don't indulge in touching the tiger or something like that. That's not the way you offer respect. So even common sense teaches us that different living entities have to be respected in different ways. trees have to be respected by protecting them and not by unnecessarily cutting them. So that's how we understand how we offer respect. But specifically, the categorization is given by Kapila Dev. Prahlad Maharaj does not elaborate on this, but Kapila Dev speaks about it, saying the spiritual master is offered the highest respect. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur mentions this point as well in his Guru Ashtakam. Sakshad haritvena samasta shastre yukta sata bhavayete shabdi kintu prabho yat priyeva tasya Vande Guru Sri Charanarvindam. So the Supreme Personality of Godhead is Krishna, but since the Guru takes us to the feet of Lord Sri Krishna, he's offered the same respect as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he's considered at the same level as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Not that the Guru becomes God, or we think the Guru is God. Srila Prabhupada is very clear on this point, that it is not that the Guru becomes God. So that is not our mood. But we offer respect to the Guru as if the Guru was at the same level as God, because he is the one who takes us to Krishna. So we should not suddenly become Mayavadis and think that the Guru becomes God. That is not what Srila Prabhupada ever taught us. Srila Prabhupada is very clear that the position of the Guru is to be honored at the level of the personality of Godhead, because the Guru is the one who makes us connect with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. I was hearing a senior Srila Prabhupada disciple speak about his experience of how he decided to get initiated by Srila Prabhupada. And he was saying that initially he was still not sure. He was still wondering whether he should surrender or not. And he was still debating this point. And so one time during Guru Puja, Srila Prabhupada was accepting Guru Puja, and everybody was singing Sri Guru Charana Padma and offering Guru Puja to Srila Prabhupada personally. And then he could see that Srila Prabhupada is also singing while he's accepting Guru Puja. So this young bhakta asked other devotees that, I can see that we are singing for Srila Prabhupada to offer him Guru Puja, but why is he also singing? So the senior devotee explained to him that Srila Prabhupada is offering Guru Puja to his Guru, while we are offering Guru Puja to our Guru. Srila Prabhupada is offering Guru Puja to his Guru. So when this bhakta heard that this is the perfect parampara, where Srila Prabhupada is accepting Guru Puja, but also then offering that same Guru Puja to his Guru, he was convinced that this is my spiritual master. So the point is that the person worthy of highest respect is the spiritual master, and then other gurus. Right? You have Shiksha gurus, just like in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, the different types of gurus are described. Vande Gurun Isha Bhaktan, Ishan Isha Avtarakan. That verse describes Gurun. So there are multiple gurus. Obviously, there's initiating spiritual master or Diksha Guru, but there's also Siksha Guru, people who give us instruction, Pat Pratakshat Guru. The father and the mother are the first gurus, because they're the ones who teach us the first instructions of how to even speak. So, so all these gurus are worthy of respect at the highest level. And then the various other Vaishnavas and living entities are God brothers and senior God brothers of our spiritual master. So they're all offered respect at the level of a spiritual master. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu demonstrated that. Right? He would always offer the highest respect to the God brothers of a spiritual master, exactly like he would a spiritual master as well, because they represent the relationship with the spiritual master. So that whole hierarchy of how we offer respect is very clearly described by Kapila Dev in his section in the third canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. But the point that we understand here is that one should offer respect to every living entity according to that living entity's position or manifestation. And so we have to use our intelligence in that sense, how we offer respect to all living entities. And how is that possible? How is that possible to follow that kind of a mindset? Vidya Vinaya Sampanne Brahmane Kavihastini Shuni Shaiva Shapakesha Pandita Samadarshina. How can we see everyone with equal vision and see that Paramatma in their heart? That is described in the prior verse. We read that yesterday, that verse that speaks about this. He says, one must accept a bona fide spiritual master and render service unto him with great devotion and faith. Whatever one has in one's possession, one should be offered to the spiritual master. And in the association of saintly persons and devotees, one should worship the Lord, hear the glories of the Lord with faith, glorify the transcendental qualities and activities of the Lord, always meditate on the Lord's lotus feet, and worship the deity of the Lord strictly according to the injunctions of Shastra and Guru. So that is a process. So it is not like automatically we will manifest some characteristics that we see everything equally. We have to follow a process. Srila Prabhupada always talked about, if you look at the translation of Srila Prabhupada, whenever the word karma yoga came, he always translated that as devotional service. When bhakti yoga was discussed, he always translated that as devotional service. So if there's not service, then there's no meaning for bhakti, because then it becomes very difficult to execute it. So the process of devotional service is how we can actually get to the point of seeing all, seeing the Lord in the core of everyone's heart and offer respects. And this whole process of devotional service is very beautifully given to us by Srila Prabhupada, where we begin our day by taking darshan of the deity of the Lord. We chant the holy name of the Lord, hear from Bhagavatam, and then engage our day in service. So this opportunity that we all have, specifically those associated with Gita Nagari, we have this wonderful opportunity to actually serve the deity of the Lord, Radha Damodar. So we should grab that opportunity with as much enthusiasm as we can muster. And I make this point because when I think about, right, at some point our body will not be able to perform that service. So we all have to recognize that at some point our body will get to a point where we will not be able to actually perform active service. So at that point we'll regret when we did not perform service when we had the opportunity. So the way we understand and appreciate devotional service is by actually performing devotional service. This is not an intellectual exercise. This is not some kind of thought experiment. It's not some kind of philosophical activity. It's actually practical service. When we perform practical service, only then do we actually understand the import and the purport of the Shastras. And this is not my opinion. This is what Srila Prabhupada actually very specifically and explicitly said over and over and over again in his purports and his classes and his talks and discussions, that Srila Prabhupada would say that if you don't perform devotional service, we will simply eat, sleep, and fall down. Those are his famous words. He said, if you don't actually perform active devotional service, we will simply eat, sleep, and fall down. So that is the sum and substance of this particular verse, where Srila Prahlad Maharaj is speaking about how we can see the presence of the Lord in each and every living entity, and proportionately and appropriately offer respect to every living entity according to that living entity's position or manifestation. So those were some of the points that I thought of making on this verse. Of course, a lot more can be said, but I wanted to see if there are any specific questions or comments at this point, or anything else you specifically would like me to elaborate on. Thank you. Hare Krishna. Any comments from anybody? Okay. If there are no questions or comments, then we can end.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Thank you, Thakur.
Thank you for your very nice class. Got a question for you. If we understand that the Lord is present as Paramatma in everyone's heart, how practically does that affect the way that we deal with others, particularly when we encounter someone who is behaving improperly or badly?
Thank you. Very nice question. And I'll go back to what Kapila Dev speaks about in the, I think this is the 27th chapter, if I'm not wrong, 27th to 28th chapter. I forget exactly which chapter of the third canto. And Kapila Dev speaks about devotees in the three modes, or bhakti in the three modes. Bhakti in the mode of ignorance, bhakti in the mode of passion, bhakti in the mode of goodness. Now, it is not that the, the bhakti itself is in the three modes. This is very clearly mentioned in the purport by Srila Prabhupada as well. And that it's not that the bhakti is in the three modes, it's the bhakta or the performer who's in the three modes. So, as a result of that, their performance of bhakti ends up sometimes being mixed with the modes. So those who are performing bhakti in the mode of ignorance sometimes will perform bhakti in a way that uh, with envy or to show themselves as better than others or exploiting others. Although they may be externally performing devotional service, chanting Hare Krishna and seemingly being in positions of spiritual authority, but their execution of bhakti ends up either traumatizing others or hurting others or generally just exploiting others for their own personal gain or prestige or whatever else. Uh, those in the mode of passion are slightly better than the ones in the mode of ignorance, where they're not in a way to destroy others, but the primary objective is to somehow uh, improve their own position or their own prestige, or show the wield the power that they have in terms of power over others and so on. And those that are in the mode of goodness will perform bhakti in a more uh, detached manner and so on. And Kapila Dev speaks about the different categories of devotees. So sometimes you see also devotees who are seemingly dressed like a Vaishnava. They wear kantimala and tilak and everything, and they have a bead bag in their hand. But sometimes their activities are may not be exactly transcendental, right? So Srila Prabhupada speaks about that in his purports as well. He says that in these scenarios, we still don't have the authority or the license to criticize them heavily or blaspheme them or anything of that sort. That's not our business. But we can definitely stay away from them in the sense that we offer respect to them from afar, right? So we don't have to associate with them. We don't have to condone their behavior. We don't have to accept their behavior, nor do we have to cover up their behavior. But it is not our, unless we are in a position of specific authority to correct them or that is our service, we should not simply blaspheme those devotees because then that becomes prajalpa and that just starts impacting our devotional service. But we should definitely uh, guard our bhakti by staying away from such people. Where if someone is behaving in an improper manner, then we should definitely guard ourselves and others that are under our protection from such a person where we don't uh, get impacted by that person's activities or behavior. But at the same time, like I said, right, it's very important to understand that Vaishnav Ninda or criticizing devotees becomes a major problem for our own bhakti. So unless it is a specific service to correct that devotee or speak about the actions of that devotee to others, we shouldn't simply engage in prajalpa. So offering respects to everyone doesn't mean that we condone nonsensical behavior. And back to Srimad Bhagavad Gita, where Duryodhan and the Dhritarashtra acted in very improper ways. And I'm not gonna, all of you know those stories. So, what was Krishna's instruction to Arjun? Krishna's instruction to Arjun was go and kill. your enemies. Go fight. He never instructed them to just offer obeisances to your enemies and then just that's and because they have Paramatma in their heart. That was never the instruction. Although Krishna says in the Gita that Arjuna Hrideshe Arjuna Tishtati, I'm sitting in everyone's heart. So his instruction was not that since I'm sitting in the heart of Duryodhan, you should offer your obeisances to Duryodhan. His instruction was shoot arrows because that is your dharma. Similarly, in the I think it's in the sixth chapter of the first canto, the son of Drona punished when Ashwatthama kills the sleeping sons of Draupadi. Uh, Arjuna says, I will bring the head of Ashwatthama, and you can stand on the head of Ashwatthama and then take your bath, O Draupadi. Right? So he goes and captures Ashwatthama, and he's ready to kill him. At that time, Draupadi is the one who says, no, don't, because he's the son of our spiritual master and represents the spiritual master, so don't kill him. But Bhima was not so keen on that message. He was like, no, you should just kill him right away. So the idea is that even among practicing devotees, they discriminate pretty heavily in terms of what is appropriate association, what is not appropriate association. So we should not somehow misunderstand this verse that we should offer respects to all living entities to mean that we should indiscriminately associate with people who have questionable character or questionable behavior. We may, but then of course, the flip of that is prajalpa. If you're simply discussing their character or activities out of a sense of gossip or just prajalpa, that is detrimental to our own spiritual life. So that we should avoid. But it doesn't mean that we either condone or accept or somehow allow improper behavior or inappropriate behavior to be accepted. That point is very clear. So the same point can be extended to even the sense of humility. Right? Sometimes when we hear so much of discussion on humility, where Krishna speaks about even in the process of knowledge that is discussed in the 13th chapter of the Gita, starting with verse 8, uh, 8 through 12, those five verses. The first word Krishna uses is amanitvam, humility, and adambitvam, pridelessness. So humility and pridelessness are emphasized by Krishna as the fundamental process of acquiring knowledge. But humility does not mean that we become subjected to abuse. So that is also a responsibility to protect ourselves from abuse and protect others that are under our control or our protection from abuse. That is our responsibility. So the idea of being humble doesn't mean that somehow we open ourselves to be abused by others or open the people those who are under our protection to be abused. So that is our responsibility. So we should not somehow consider the idea of Tronadapi Sunichena Toro Revasashtina to be an invitation for us to become abused by those who are willfully abusing us. That is not the instruction. But at that same time, we should not whimsically appoint ourselves as the fault finder in chief for the whole universe and start finding fault. That is not our job. And that Vaishnav Ninda is also discussed by acharyas that is the biggest reason that checks our progress in spiritual life. So it's a delicate balance. You have to have some maturity to be able to discriminate when are we being appropriately critical and when are we actually performing Vaishnav Ninda. So that is some of the points I was thinking about on this verse. Prabhuji, I don't know if that completely answers your question or not. So please add or add to it.
That's really good. Thank you. I have another quicker question. When devotees offer respect to one another, are they offering respect necessarily to Paramatma, or are they also respecting the Jivatma, um, both simultaneously.
Yeah, so the answer to that is also very clearly mentioned in the Shastra. I'm not able to quote the specific verse, but it is both. So the living entity, the Jivatma, is also part and parcel of the Lord. So we offer respect because Jivatma is also spiritually and qualitatively one with the Lord. The spiritual spark of the living entity is qualitatively one with the Lord. So when we offer respects to another living entity, we offer respect both to the living entity Jiva and the Paramatma sitting in their heart. Because sometimes we realize that the Jivatma is covered by many koshas or these coverings. And sometimes the consciousness might be quite subdued. But still, the living entity has the Paramatma in their heart. But when the Atma is more liberated in the sense that not so much covering and more enlightened, then we are able to see the glory of the Atma directly. Like in the case of when we offer respects to the spiritual master, right? We're actually offering respects to the living entity who is our spiritual master, and not just to the Paramatma sitting in the heart, because the Paramatma sitting in the heart is equally in everyone's heart. So the reason why we distinguish how we offer respects to various living entities is because of the position of the Atma. Because the nature of the Paramatma in every living entity is identical, right? So if you were only offering respect to the Paramatma, then you would offer respects equally to every living entity. To a cobra, to a tiger, and to a spiritual master would be equally offered the exact same respect. But that is not how we do it, right? So we offer a lot more reverential respect to our spiritual master, and to some of the living entities, we offer a respect in the form of affection or in the form of sweet words or whatever else. And so while we recognize the presence of the Paramatma in everyone's heart, the distinction of how we offer respect is really dependent on the position of the specific jivatma. The jivatma in the vapu of a spiritual master is offered vast amount of respects, right? Whereas the jivatma that's sitting in the body of an insect, although the paramatma is also sitting in the body of the insect, is we respectfully don't just crush the insect. We respectfully deal with the insect as well. If there's an insect inside the house that is causing botheration, then you would gently pick up the insect and put that insect outside the house. So that is your way of offering respect to the jivatma of the insect. Although the paramatma sitting in the insect and the paramatma sitting in the spiritual master is identical, the level of consciousness of the jivatma in the spiritual master and the level of consciousness of the jivatma in the insect are vastly different. Does that answer your question, Prabhu?
Yes, very nice. And raises another question for me. I'm trying to understand how to regard Paramatma within the heart of different living entities. And, sometimes, um, as was the case for Arjuna, devotees are sometimes obliged to kill. And trying to understand how how one is supposed to be thinking as as a devotee of Krishna, in Krishna consciousness. What is the mindset of a devotee? How how is he thinking? How is he regarding the the presence of Paramatma, the presence of a Jivatma, and yet having to take the life of an another living entity, destroying a body that is also inhabited by Paramatma seems I don't know, disrespectful. But I'm trying to understand how you know, even in the modern context, we have on Srila Prabhupada's instruction, um, our temples sometimes have teams of individuals, devotees, who are um, their service is to protect the devotees. Um, they they will be armed, and in the event of something like a mass shooting, which unfortunately sometimes happens in churches and schools. There was a Sikh temple once attacked. Um, Sometimes even ISKCON temples have been attacked in various ways. Um, I have had to deal with attacks on a temple that I was in. Things happen, and but and in that instance, I was not thinking about Paramatma. I wasn't even thinking about the Jivatma. I was just thinking about on the one hand, I've got a devotee who's been attacked. He's lying on the front steps of the temple. Uh, Blood is pouring out of his head. I'm trying to subdue the attacker. I'm not really thinking in terms of the presence of Paramatma, but how should one properly understand such a situation? What should be the mentality of a devotee in Krishna consciousness when they are obliged to defend or even attack?
Yeah, thank you, Prabhu. I'll speak from what Srila Prabhupada says in the second chapter of the Gita. The specific purport where he addresses this, and he says that non-violence is not an absolute principle. Sometimes violence is necessary to maintain law and order and to protect dharma. And he says that the philosophy of non-violence on the battlefield is the philosophy of fools. Uh, so, so sometimes, because there are living entities who will not heed any other method than violence. Even Srila Prabhupada speaks about this, and this is in Chanakya Niti as well, that uh, Sama, Dama, Danda, Veda. So there are four ways to pacify, and Srila Prabhupada speaks about this in the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam when Vasudeva is being taken by Devaki, and Devaki are being taken on the chariot by Kamsa, and when Kamsa decides to sever the head of Devaki, then Vasudeva uses various techniques to pacify, uh, and so he uses praise, he uses uh, a threat, he uses all these different techniques. One of the techniques is also of diplomacy is also danda or punishment. So it's not the first tool of diplomacy where you immediately go and start a war or attack physically, but it is one of the tools. The threat of the threat of violence has to be sometimes used to be able to subdue somebody who's not going to listen to any other form of reason. If someone is attacking somebody else, even the police may first ask him to desist. They may ask him to drop his weapons or reason with that person. But if that none of those arguments work, police then have to take an action to punish in some sense or even disarm by shooting the leg or whatever else. That's part of the the dharma shastra of protecting your duty. So in some cases, it's in the best interest of the living entity for them to be stopped in their tracks from what they're going to do. Srila Prabhupada mentions in the purport as well that sometimes the judge offers a death penalty to somebody who's committed a murder. But by offering a death penalty to a person who committed murder, they're preventing that person from committing further crimes this lifetime and also paying for their crime so that they don't have to continue to pay for that in their next lifetime. So it's also a sign of mercy on that living entity by preventing them from continuing to create more destruction. So these are some of the points that Srila Prabhupada mentioned. So in the so as long as we're not doing it out of spite, right? We're doing it as a sense of duty. If your duty is to protect the the temple and the living entities living in the temple, and if someone willfully comes and attacks and tries to cause bodily harm, then it is your responsibility to protect them. Just like how Krishna was telling Arjun, pick up your arms and fight. So it's done in the sense of, in that sense, as opposed to if someone whimsically goes out and starts shooting people, then that's whimsical. That is never excused. And Srila Prabhupada specifically mentions in the purport that this philosophy is not meant to whimsically kill others or destroy others' property or even kill animals, merciless killing of animals for meat eating. This is not the excuse for that. But in the pursuit of performing your prescribed duty, and the gist of the whole second chapter, the verses from verse 11 through 30, which is the Jnana section of the second chapter, the gist of that whole chapter is that the body can never be protected or saved indefinitely. The soul can never be killed. Therefore, in the inevitable discharge of your duty, do not lament. So the point that Krishna is making is that in the inevitable discharge of your duty, do not unnecessarily lament. So in the scenario of you protecting other devotees from bodily harm, you're discharging your prescribed duty of protecting other devotees. So in that case, we should not unnecessarily lament that we're causing bodily harm to the aggressor, because that is not an authorized lamentation. That's how exactly what Krishna told Arjun, that don't lament for the destruction of the bodies of the people you consider dear to you, because that's unnecessary lamentation. Does that answer the question, Prabhu?
Yep, sure does. Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you.
Hare
We'll stop
Krishna.
here, Prabhuji. Thank you. Hare Krishna.